A Kazuo Ishiguro's novel Never Let Me Go was first published in 2005. It's among the author's most beloved books and was adapted into a film only 5 years after its initial release. The story takes place in an alternate reality that's very similar to our own, but which deviates from it in one particular and fundamental respect. Thus, the novel functions as light science fiction, and through the power of the author's writing, it hits harder and truer than pure realism often can. Whenever Ishiguro writes about people that aren't quite us, you know he's really writing about us. This was true 16 years before Never Let Me Go in The Remains of the Day. You ain't a butler. And 16 years after Never Let Me Go in the recent Clara and the Sun. You ain't an android. Like so many of his other novels, Ishiguro tells Never Let Me Go through a narrator who simultaneously knows more and less than us. Kathy H. writes to an audience comprised of people just like her, so we only gradually learn about the unfamiliar world of carers and donors and students. Kathy takes us through a life shared with two close friends, Ruth and Tommy. Through the novel's 3 parts, we watch these 3 friends develop over 3 different periods: their youth, their young adulthood, and their early 30s. The plot moves through the uncertainty of youth into the complexity of mature friendships, how they evolve and intensify or fall apart. It's painful in its accuracy. There is a frightening horror story underneath it all at the core of this book, but there's also a heavy sense of nostalgia, some powerful commentary on the role of art, and most prominently, a haunting depiction of the joys and pains of growing up. It's about partial understandings and attempting to improve your situation after it's too late. It's about the agony of human choices, and it's about the belief that love alone will get you through. Ultimately, it's a disturbing and heartbreaking story, but it's also a poignant and worthwhile read.
The first time I read the novel, it was from this Vintage Canada edition. It's a trade paperback, and it features a photographic image of a boat and a dock with yellow and brown colors. It's the dreaded movie tie-in version, which is often the least desirable copy of a book to collectors. There is no introduction here, but there is some brief back matter, 11 Reader's Guide questions, and 11 more that look to compare the book to the film adaptation. This edition was printed in 2010, and it features plain title pages for each of the novel's 3 parts, in addition to these 4 curious and unique embellishments that serve as breaks in the text. These little creature drawings become relevant to the story about halfway through. I happen to be a great admirer of Ishiguro's writing, so when I had the chance to upgrade to a more deluxe illustrated hardcover treatment of one of his major works, I had to take it. So let's do this. Here we have Never Let Me Go from the Folio Society. This version was originally released in 2012 and is presented in a plain dark blue slipcase. It has a lovely cover designed by Kate Miller. The front features an illustration of Hailsham in gray and black. 3 balloons in yellow, which might represent the 3 friends at the center of this story, are set against an azure cloth cover that wraps around to the back. This bold blue color seems rather susceptible to rubbing and wear, so be careful when handling the book, especially when taking it in and out of the tight slipcase. On the spine, we note the author's name in white, the title in a distinct yellow script, with an image of the 3 friends in silhouette above the publisher name, all in gray. The binding is finished with a blue and white headband. When we crack the book open, we see plain dark blue end papers in a medium stock. The book is printed on Abbey wove paper, which is smooth due to the fine wire mesh used in its production. Color swatches indicate that this paper is close to ultra white. The book has plain, dedicated title pages for each of the novel's 3 parts, and each of the book's 23 chapters begins on a fresh page. If we bring back the vintage edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society version is slightly bigger, with an extra 2.5 centimeters in height and 3 centimeters in width. The font size isn't any larger, but the printing is darker and crisper on the Folio version, which also has improved spacing, contributing to improved readability. The introduction is by Claire Massoud, and it is exceptional. She's an author and a literary professor. In this 8-page introduction, which thoughtfully warns of its spoilers right away via footnote, she places the novel in a literary tradition of stories about the attempt to preserve a sense of humanity in the absurd face of our mortality. Then she discusses her own initial reading of the book, focusing on her surprise and the power of its ultimate reveals. She compares it to Ishiguro's other great novel, The Remains of the Day, then discusses some of the more uncomfortable ideas in Never Let Me Go. Kate Miller provides 9 interior illustrations. Her work appears to be a combination of hand-drawn and photographic elements with digital color and texture techniques. It features the bold and echoey dynamics of screen printing, which results in vibrant, layered images. The art is presented on a toothy, thicker stock, and the images all land within a dozen pages of the text they coincide with. Let's take a detailed look at this amazing artwork. The first illustration, the frontispiece, is of an early scene that takes place outside the Hailsham Sports Pavilion. In the foreground, we see young Tommy in the midst of one of his tantrums after he's been snubbed by the other boys in a football game. They leave the field as our narrator Kathy H. approaches to point out the mud on Tommy's beloved blue polo shirt. There's wonderful texture work on the sky and grass, but it's the expression on Tommy's face that really appeals to me on this one. The second illustration is a depiction of the Hailsham sales, when the students can spend their tokens on items that come from the outside. We see 2 children looking into the cardboard boxes used to deliver the items, which normally include toys and clothing. This third child holds a cassette tape which commands attention not only because it's in the center of the image, but because of how concretely it's rendered compared to the other details of the image, which are softer or feature that echoed ethereal effect. The third piece is of another scene Kathy H. describes from her youth. She's in her dorm room clutching a pillow like it's a baby, singing along to her favorite song. Madame can be seen in the doorway watching and upset at the tender display. Kate Miller has included the song's central lyrics in her illustration here, which is where the title of this novel comes from. This is a great illustration of a potent moment in the book. The fourth image is of a scene that occurs shortly after our characters have left Hailsham and are trying to adjust to life in the cottages. Kathy is outside reading when Ruth sits down next to her. The conversation quickly turns frosty as the 2 friends bicker about maturity and authenticity. This image reveals precise attention to detail as we can see the cottages on the horizon, a touch of the autumn foliage, and the old tarpaulin that Kathy uses as a reading mat. The fifth illustration is of an important scene that occurs during a trip to the town of Norfolk. Ruth wants to catch a glimpse of a particular woman who works in an office, her possible, and eventually they find the place. Here, Ruth is hopefully pressed up against the outside of the office window, with Kathy standing behind her with a closed-off expression. We can see the town behind them, and the streaks across the image add to the illusion that we're viewing this scene from behind a pane of glass. The sixth image depicts one of the final interactions between Tommy, Ruth, and Kathy while at the cottages. About half a mile from home, they find a peaceful, overgrown churchyard with gravestones, and we can see that Kate Miller takes care to include these details in this superb textured and layered background. Note the somber looks of the 3 figures, all in black line that suggests the problematic aspects of the conversations that occur here. The seventh image is of Kathy's time as a carer, when she comes upon one of her old acquaintances from the cottages in a car park. I love the details and composition of this image. The blue and gray color scheme capture the cold day that the narrator describes, with hints of movement in the sky and background figures who are bundled up with umbrellas and heavy coats. I can actually feel the chill in this illustration. I think this might be my favorite of the bunch. The eighth illustration is from the third part of the novel. The 3 recently reunited friends head out to find a beached boat that they've heard others discuss. They trek through some thin woods and come to an open marshland under a pale, vast sky. Miller has captured every detail of this scene, from the weak lighting to the white beached boat on the marshes, to the dead tree trunk between Tommy and Ruth, to Kathy's separate positioning. The final image is of a scene near the novel's climax, when Kathy and Tommy travel to Littlehampton to track down the mysterious Madame. They follow her down the street as the setting sun falls behind the row housing. These beach huts line the seafront, and the gulls in the sky are included in the background, while the generous application of the warm orange color helps this image convey more hope than the previous pieces, which were dominated by cold and muted color schemes. Still, there is an emptiness to this composition, which ultimately echoes the heartbreaking culmination of the novel. Occasionally, there are illustrators who absolutely nail the tone of the book and echo it in their own style. This is one of those instances. Artist Kate Miller's work here reveals an intimate study and profound understanding of Ishiguro's novel. She emphasizes major and more subtle symbols. She uses color and texture to capture the mood of each scene she illustrates, and each of her choices works to enhance my own appreciation of the story. This is top tier stuff. I'm pretty hyped by this upgrade to my bookshelf. The Folio Society's version of Never Let Me Go has a stunning design and exceptional illustrations. It's only ever had a single printing and is tough to find. It commands rather high prices on the secondary market, but it pairs up so nicely with their edition of The Remains of the Day, and I've got my fingers crossed for future Ishiguro releases from Folio. When it comes to my trade edition, it's going straight to the box of doom.
Perfect.
So I can make more room on the shelf for more great books. As always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos. When it comes to the stories you love, it's always worth upgrading your books.